I'm the last person, so I'm going to open my laptop first. But I know, because I do a lot of speaking, and I know it takes a lot of effort to stay till the end, so I appreciate you staying till the end. Let me see if my laptop... There we go. So the title is very abstract, and I think that's okay, because then you don't know what to expect if you're expecting something. It's always good to have this idea of surprise. And here, it's kind of hard to see, but when I thought of Montenegro, what came to mind was basically when I used to watch the Olympics, the opening ceremony. And I remember watching the Olympics, and someone would come out with the Serbia-Montenegro flag and stuff, and that's actually my only connection to Montenegro until now, till today. And I'm excited to be here. So let's see. Let's see if my clicker works. Yep, there we go. Design of every day. So I believe, if you look at this, I believe connection is the essence of us and what we do. And technology, if we think about, because we are a higher form of animals as well, and technology, we're the only animals on the planet that have a higher form of technology. So that makes us human as well. But this idea of being connected, that is really about what we are as well. And it's been even proven, it's been proven that in this book here, it's kind of hard to see, that the more friends you have, the longer you will live. That's a proven fact, and it's based on this book here, The Girls from Ames, and they figured out all this group of girls, they were tight with each other. They were really tight and friendly with each other, and they lived longer than the other people in that city because they didn't have as many friends. I think that's important because that's one thing that the internet and everything today allows us to do is have connections with other people. So just a little background where I'm from. I'm from the US, if you can't tell. And in the US, when Europeans think of the US, it's usually either New York City or San Francisco. And I'm from a state called Minnesota. It's here, and it's what we call a flyover state. So you just fly over it, typically, if you're going to go to the U.S. So Minnesota is up by Canada, borders Canada. I grew up playing ice hockey, doing these other things, sledding, skiing. And what you can't see now because of the screen is there's a little city called Winona, and an actress, my favorite actress back in the 90s, I guess, the 80s, was Winona Ryder. Do some of you know who Winona Ryder is? You might know her from Edward Scissorhands. And then most recently, she was in this TV series, Stranger Things. Some of you guys know Stranger Things, I guess, Netflix. It's coming out soon, the next season. Just see if this works here. There it is. And what's interesting is, I think technology, consumer technology, has become the new pop culture. And I think a lot of us can relate to each other, even though I've never been to Montenegro. Maybe at some point you used to also watch Charlie's Angels and Gilligan's Islands and stuff like that. And then through pop culture, we can relate to each other. And like pop culture from yesterday, today I believe technology is the new pop culture. So we can relate to each other through Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it might be. So let me just play this clip from Stranger Things. Last year, this is 2017, the Screen Actors Guild Awards. They won for Best Drama in the series. And what's interesting with this clip is, I fast forward at some point, but what's interesting is, this is Winona now, how she is now. She's still quite nice. But her reaction, some of you might have seen this because it went kind of viral on the internet. But just watch Winona as she listens to her partner speak.
We'd like to thank Netflix, Sean, Matt, Ross, and the amazing casting director, Carmen Cuba. And I would just like to say that in light of all that's going on in the world today, it's difficult to celebrate the already celebrated Stranger Things.
But this award from you, who take your craft seriously and earnestly believe, like me, that great acting can change the world, is a call to arms from our fellow craftsmen and women to go deeper, and through our art to battle against fear, self-centeredness, and exclusivity of our predominantly narcissistic culture, and through our craft to cultivate a more empathetic and understanding society by revealing intimate truths that serve as a forceful reminder to folks that when they feel broken and afraid and
are not alone. We are united in that we are all human beings, and we are all together on this horrible, painful, joyous, exciting, and mysterious ride that is being alive.
So Winona Ryder, right? And she became a meme basically. But what's interesting is I think a lot of us have these emotions that she went through. If you think about how we go with what's happening today with digital and media and advertising, whatever it might be, whatever your industry might be, and it's all these things that we go through. So just a little tangent, basically. I think what's important for every company is to have a purpose, a mission statement. And as Lazlo knows, Google's mission statement was organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Nike's is if you have a body, you're an athlete, more or less. And I think every great company has a mission statement because it's important today to have a purpose. So, but that being said, I also believe it's important for individuals to have mission statements as well. You have to understand, and I worked at Google for 4 years and I quit in 2016, and I would argue that quite a few people there, maybe they like the free food and the amenities of Google, but I don't think they really don't enjoy going to work per se. And I think a lot of people just don't have a purpose in life besides making money. And I think most companies, if they're built like that, they're just living on the quarter, waiting for the next quarter, then I argue that they won't be relevant at some point. So this is my mission statement. And since quitting at Google and being myself, working with other companies, I work with Adidas, I work with Nike and Porsche right now, and we just try to figure out what works best for them based on my experience, which is design and culture and business consultancy. So design of everyday things, and the point of that is basically when you think of design, what do you think of? And for a lot of people, design is just it's the aesthetics, the way something looks or the way something feels. And that's the definition of design. But if you really think about design in a deeper sense, like a lot of tech companies today think about it, it's the way things work. Design is the way things work today. And that's why you see companies like Google, to some degree, or Apple and Airbnb and all these other companies, they understand that design is essential in what they do. It's not just about making a nicer logo or changing the colors. It's the way things actually are designed, or the way things move through the process. And I think that's important to understand, because what I've noticed is if you look at Silicon Valley right now, design and designers have been elevated on the same level as engineering, the same level as people that are programming and stuff. And that's really important because the design is more than just the way something looks. It's the whole experience of something. So I'm going to talk about 3 things, 3 chapters basically: experience, imagine, and then create. And we'll zip through these pretty quick because I know there's something after this, so we'll see how that goes. So number 1, the experience. If you think about computing in the era of computers, there's basically 4 eras of computing. The first era was the mainframe era, that was in the 60s. And what would it would be basically like this big thing here, this big black thing, would be the computer, and all of us would have to share time on the computer. So that means if you had to sign up for computing time. So some people would have to go at 3 o'clock in the morning to process their stuff. And there was one computer to many people. And then the second era is this era called personal computing, and we all went through this. This is in the 80s and 90s, and we had like a Mac at home or IBM or whatever. We had our personal computers. The era we're in now is called mobile computing, and that means we have our desktop computers, but we also have our mobile phones with us. So it's many computers to one person. And the era that I find personally interesting is what we call pervasive computing or ubiquitous computing. And what that means is their computers are going to be everywhere. They're going to be built into the surroundings, built into the buildings. And what's interesting there, if you're not into computing, and you don't have to be, but what's interesting is if you think about the past, it was us as humans, we would have to adapt to the machines. So every time you go type something, that means you had to be more machine-like than the machine had to be more human-like. Or if you use a mouse, that means you had to be more like a machine, or whatever it is. Any of the inputs were more machine-based. But we're moving into the era where machines are being more human-like. So if you think about natural language input, like speaking to Amazon Echo or whatever it might be, they are understanding what we do better. And I think that's interesting because that means it allows us as humans to be more human-like and machines to be more machine-like. But that also means, I live in Germany, And as you know, in Germany, or if you do know, Germany is very sensitive with data and privacy. I don't know how Montenegro is, but Germany's like the Catholic Church versus some liberal church. And what's interesting is what's scary for a lot of people, at least that are scared with data, is there is a lot more data being used. So if you think about Google and all these big companies, that's Google's model is to take your data and sell it to advertisers. That's their model. There's no doubt about that. And if you're scared about that, then there's a reason to be, because they've become very powerful, just like Facebook, Amazon, and everyone else. So you have to think critically about these things. But it also means that it's going to become easier to do things because we don't have to adapt so much to the machine. That being said, I think we're moving into this era that I call the experience economy, and other people call the experience economy. It's no longer just about goods or products. It's about the whole experience. And what that means is we're shifting from commodity to an experience. So a commodity is anything that's, you can replace it with something else. So shoes are a commodity. Adidas, Nike, everyone that makes shoes, they're all replaceable. It's the brand that differentiates it, basically. So a commodity is a basic item used in commerce. And then we have goods, service, and a lot of people are still here, the goods. Some people are doing the service a little bit. But I think the experience thing is the interesting bit, because an experience is more holistic and it leaves an impression on you. So an experience for me is, if you think about a telecom company, let's say it's a Deutsche Telekom in Germany. So you might go into a retail store and the experience might be okay, and that's fine. But if you call, let's say I have I call up the call center because something's wrong with my SIM card, and the call center is not so great. The experience is bad. That's also part of the experience. And I think a lot of people in management across the board, they don't understand inherently that experience entails everything. Jeff Bezos said it best, is the brand is defined by what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I think that's where people really have to listen. If you work in a big company, you have to listen to what people are saying when they're not in the room, when you don't have anyone else in the room. So the experience is something that is being changed dramatically. And I think these new companies, they really understand it's really about the user. It's not only about the product. So, and some of you know this. So what it looks like is basically, or what's happening is, we have different expectations based on what's happening today. So the way we live is changing forever. We have different expectations. It's no longer, I just want to go to the grocery store and get something. It's different. They have new expectations. It's kind of hard to read there. So it's about customization, not ownership. Best case scenario, when you buy something, it's for you. It's personalized. It's not just for everybody else. It's really about outcomes and not generalizations. You really are expecting an outcome and not just some general result. And this is from software, but this idea of constant improvement and not planned obsolescence. And what that means is, if you think about your relationships, because the experience economy is about relationships, if you think about your relationship with other people, hopefully that gets better over time. If you have a boyfriend, girlfriend, your family, your colleagues, you want a relationship that will be better over time and not get worse over time. And the same with your relationship with brands. You want that to get better over time. And you have to work on that. And that means basically, how do you make that relationship better if you can? So here's some experience makers, and this week in Germany, and maybe you guys say that here, it's called GAFA, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, and they're incredibly powerful. But they really understand what an experience is, for better or worse. In 2011, when Larry Page returned as the CEO, his first directive, his first order was basically, we want to redesign all of our products. Because he inherently understood that Google had fundamentally, their stuff worked, but the experience was sometimes not the best. So they redesigned all the projects, and that was called Project Kennedy. And Apple has been, Apple design and engineering have been one from the beginning, and you see that in the products as well. So these new companies, Tesla, Spotify, Airbnb, they're obviously disrupting a lot of things. If you've read recently, Airbnb is actually going to open up a hotel, so the new economy is moving into the old economy. That's happening as well. But basically, what is the common thread between these companies? And the common thread is they understand that it's about the experience. They want a memorable experience, and that's really key. So number one is about empathy. And empathy is really having a really deep understanding and feelings for someone else. And I would argue that most people at the C level, so on the chairman level, on the board level, they have no idea what the typical user or person or customer is feeling when they use their products. Most people don't. I'd say they're wildly out of touch. If you think about insurance, for example, an example is when I had children, my wife and I wanted to get life insurance, right? So I called up and I asked them, so what is the process? Can you send me all the documentation to file a claim when I die, basically? And they said, no, you can't. We can't do that. You need a death certificate. You need to die before you understand the process. And that for me was like, okay, I'm not going to go with this insurance company because they can't even lay out in clear terms what I need to do when I die. So that's what I mean, basically. You have to have empathy. You have to understand inherently what other people are going through, and then you'll create that experience a little bit better. Number two, it's emotion. It's really about emotion. And we see emotion can be positive and negative, but we see this time and time again. Emotion is stronger than any fact, any numbers. And you see that in the US and to some degree in the UK too. It's also because why did Trump get elected? It was strongly based on emotions. He was able to appeal to the emotions of his user base or his voter base. And last thing is this frictionless, this idea of things are becoming easier. So how do you make things easier for your user, for your customer? An example of that is Uber. Does anyone have tried Uber over here? I mean, we know that their culture is not so great now. It's not that good, but the user experience is quite good. And the difference is, or Apple, the difference is when I use an Uber, you order the car and you see it where it is on your phone. And then when you get out, you don't even have to deal with paying them. And that was the worst thing about when I go to London. A couple years ago, when you went to London, you had to pay cash for a taxi driver. And if you're coming from Montenegro, if you're coming from Germany, then sometimes you don't have the British pound. It's like, oh, you don't take credit cards. That's not a great experience. So what this means basically is they're creating meaningful relationships with other people. All these companies, and that's why those companies are winning, in my opinion. And the old economy companies are not winning because they don't have a relationship with other people. And if they do, it's typically not a great experience. So the second thing is imagine, and it's something I find we as children can do really well. And if you have children, you know that children have amazing imaginations. They can think of anything. And I think as we grow up, as we go through the institutions, education and work and stuff, this idea of imagination, it kind of gets taken out of us. We're less open to asking questions. So just some inspirational quotes and why imagination is important. So this was actually said, the emperor, the king of Prussia said this, if you remember back, obviously you don't because none of us lived in that era, but at some point we all had relationships with our horses. Horses were the way we grew things, agriculture. It was the way we got to work from A to B. We would have to go to the blacksmith to help, with the horse's shoe, to do the shoe. And horses were a way of life. But now if you think about horses, basically it's only for the rich people that play polo or people that are into hobby, like riding or whatever. But horses are not part of our everyday life anymore. It's because of Benz, right? And cars. Cars have taken over the horse's role. Another example is this idea of flying. There's always, when you have a great idea, there's always going to be doubters. And I think that's the hardest thing in any company, even at a company like Google or Facebook or whatever it might be, that if you have an idea, typically you're going to be your manager will probably typically say to you, hey, that's a great idea, but first we have to work on our quarterly results before you work on this crazy idea. But the crazy ideas, those are the ideas that are memorable. So this is Kitty Hawk, the first flight. And then this one, at some point, Ken Olsen, this is from DEC, so you have to be really a little bit older to even remember what DEC is as a computer company. But I mean, obviously, why would, if during this era, in the 70s or late 80s, why would anybody need a computer at home? Computers are for work. And this is a photo of the first Mac team. And if you think about it now, computers are basically a way of life. Like I said earlier, they've become pop culture with the mobile phone. And what I find interesting is with technology is not the technology itself, but just like anything, And this is why I encourage companies like whoever it might be, Porsche or whoever, to just invest in a few things, like buy a drone, buy things, because if you have these things around, then you're more open to playing with these things. Just like if you have whatever it might be, if you're at home and you have kids and you have Lego, you're more open to play with Lego if the Lego is there. It's more accessible. So you have to have these things around to actually try them out. And that's something that I find quite disheartening is when I used to talk to planners, strategic planners or whatever, and you'd have these people that would not have tried out anything like Facebook because they're scared of data, which is okay. But then how can you work on communications when you don't understand where a lot of people are actually communicating with one another? So we have to try these things out. So one thing I like to do, and I mentioned this to one of the organizers, is you guys know, or a good example is the mobile phone, right? So now the mobile phone, I guess most people have the mobile phone, right? Smartphones. And since they all have cameras on them, all of a sudden photography has become almost a throwaway thing. So what it has become is basically if you see someone popular like, I don't know, Justin Bieber or whatever it might be, instead of getting his autograph, you want to go get a selfie with him, right? So instead of it used to be, let's go get his autograph. Now it's like, okay, let's go take a photo with each other because it's so cheap to do. What I like to do instead of the selfie is what I call a droney. So if you have a quadcopter or a drone with a camera on it, then you take a droney instead of a selfie. Let me show you what this looks like. This was my first time in Warsaw. I brought my drone too, so if you guys have any ideas for good drone shots. This was in the middle of the city center, basically, and this is Russia's gift to Poland. This building. And what's amazing with that is not just the video. The video is kind of nice, but what's amazing is that when you have these things, it changes your perspective. And I think that's what great technology does. It changes your perspective on life. And before I could have maybe I could have done this with a helicopter ride or something, but now you can do this with like a $500 drone. And I think that's amazing. And I think there's so many opportunities. That's why you don't understand when I talk to creative people, there's no reason not to be trying things out today. There's no reason to just say, okay, I want to do another TV spot, or I want to do another print spot. That's important, but first understand who you're speaking to and then try things out. And what that means is it's really about the DNA of companies. While most companies, I know in Germany, at least from experience, they're driven by fear. We call it Angstgetrieben, right? They're driven by fear, and that's why you see companies, they don't progress because everybody is a little bit too scared to try something a little bit new. And the structure doesn't allow for it. So you think about what does that mean? And this idea also in Germany, it's this idea of failing. You don't really fail that much in Germany or in Switzerland, for that matter. It's not a thing. But there are different ways to fail, and individually. So there's two ways to fail that I like to say. So number one is something we can all relate to. You don't hit your plan. So let's say I want to go try out for a marathon, and I have a schedule how many kilometers I'm going to run each week. And at some point, the marathon is there. In the end, I just didn't run enough kilometers, so I didn't hit my plan. Or if you're in sales, maybe you have a sales goal, and you just don't hit your goal, so you fail. But the bigger way to fail today is you hit your plan, but your plan wasn't big enough. And this is what a lot of companies are going to go through. They just do not think big enough. So this is worse than the first one, actually. So maybe you hit your quarterly goals if you're in sales or whatever it might be every quarter. Everything's perfect, but in the end you failed anyway because someone else had a little bit bigger idea. The best example of this is this guy, and if you might not know this photo, but this is the last CEO from Nokia. And with his quote here, this was the last press conference. The quote here is, "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost." Nokia did everything, they hit their plan, they did okay design and stuff, but in the end, Apple was a little bit braver and a little bit more, they used their imagination a little bit better. So in the end, they lost, which is sad for Nokia because they were around for a long time. But I guarantee you we're going to see a lot more companies, especially in Germany, because there's a lot of power there and a lot of influence, and they just don't think big enough in the end. Everybody's a little bit too scared to try something a little bit further. And it's hard. It's not an easy thing to get people out of their comfort zones, because I live in Germany, and Germany has a really big comfort zone. I love our 30 days vacation. I love all these things that we have, and it's hard to get people out of there. But since the world is changing so quickly today, you have to be just uncomfortable every day, and that means you have to try something new every day. So this is the result of what happened, basically. So Nokia dies, then Apple becomes the most valuable company in the world. Right now they're worth about 800 billion, which is almost $1 trillion, which is crazy to think about that, all based on the iPhone for the most part. And they really understood you have to be audacious, what you say. You have to really shoot for the moon and try things out. And if you don't do that, then you might fail, which is hard to say if your company is struggling anyway. So I show this a lot when I speak, and I believe this is true. When I talk to companies today, they say, okay, maybe we need to communicate more. Maybe we have to throw in an intranet, or maybe everyone should get a smartphone, an Apple iPhone or whatever. But it's not the technology that's hard. What's hard, because technology is easy, as we know. The biggest limiting factor today is not tech. Tech is so accessible today. There's no reason not to try these things out. The big thing today for most companies is it's the people in an organization that are not used to questioning things. So you have people that have been working there for a long time, even at Google, even at Facebook, and they're just so used to doing things that they just don't question why they do them. They just keep doing them over and over again, and at some point they become irrelevant. And the big question is, and I don't have the answer to that right now, is how do you get people to question the status quo? How do you get people to change inherently what they do if they've been doing it for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years? It's really, really difficult. And that's, for me, in Germany, we have this thing called digital transformation. That's the big topic. But for me, it's really about this cultural transformation. How do you get people to really question why they're doing things? So the last thing is create. And I believe the questions, based on that last slide, questions are more important than the answers today. We can get answers everywhere today, and Google is the best for that. If you have what's the population of Montenegro? You can just look it up on Google. What's the best place to go take a drone shot? Maybe they don't have that in Google for Montenegro, but you can get answers for almost everything. So in a world where you have answers for everything, questions become more relevant and more important. So for me, I see it like this. Questions are art. So art is really about asking questions. And when I say art, it could be performing art, it could be visual arts, it could be whatever. And the answers are about the tech. And these two things, when they go together, it sounds kind of cheesy, it creates magic. And I think that's what Apple has done, that's what Google has done, and all these other companies, Tesla, BMW to some degree, do that. But I think it's the combination of these two things. But art is always asking questions. Tech is always answering questions. That's why this diversity is also important in companies. The diversity of not just gender or religion or race, it's also a diversity of mindsets. And why is that? Why are we where we are? I think the biggest disruption is because of this. You guys remember the bodyguard?
Love you. We'll always love you.
Okay, enough of Whitney. But anyway, the internet it's so great because there's this meme or this T-shirt or something I've seen. It says, "You're not an artist, you're not a designer, you're not a whatever. You just have an internet connection." And sometimes it feels like that. You're not a writer, you just have an internet connection. But what's great with the internet is it allows us to do what I said in the very beginning of the slide. It allows us to connect with other people. Connect with other people that might not be around you locally, but might be in somewhere like Alaska, even if you're sitting here in Montenegro. You might have shared interests, and that's great. And I think companies, and more important, individuals that understand this, they have been winning in the end. So I'm going to show a few examples, and these are old examples, but I think they're still quite relevant today. So some of you know Dollar Shave Club. Maybe you're not subscribers, but you know the video because the video was quite iconic at the time. And this is how, I write The Brave because this is how he launched his company. He didn't do a TV spot. He didn't do a thing. He wrote this thing that lasted like 3 minutes, this long video, and he put it online. There was a little bit of luck involved and a little bit of VC money, a little bit of funding, but in the end, it turned out okay for him.
Hi, I'm Mike, founder of DollarShaveClub.com. What is DollarShaveClub.com? Well, for $1 a month, we send high-quality razors right to your door. Yeah, $1. Are the blades any good? No. Our blades are f***ing great. Each razor has stainless steel blades, an aloe vera lubricating strip, and a pivot head. It's so gentle a toddler could use it. And do you like spending $20 a month on brand name razors? 19 go to Roger Federer. I'm good at tennis. And do you think your razor needs a vibrating handle, a flashlight, a back scratcher, and 10 blades? Your handsome-ass grandfather had 1 blade and polio. Looking good, Pop-Up! Stop paying for shave tech you don't need. And stop forgetting to buy your blades every month. Alejandro and I are going to ship them right to you. We're not just selling razors, we're also making new jobs. Alejandro, what were you doing last month?
Not working.
What are you doing now?
Working.
I'm no Vanderbilt, but this train makes hay. So stop forgetting to buy your blades every month and start deciding where you're going to stack all those dollar bills I'm saving you. We are DollarShaveClub.com, and the party is on.
Okay, so yes, disruption. What he basically did is, and those of you that have to buy razors every month or week know this, when you, in Germany, and I think in most countries in Europe, when you go to the store and you want to buy a razor, you go to the shelf, and you see, okay, I want to buy this razor, I want to buy a replacement razor, and you see you can't buy it, you get a little piece of cardboard, then you have to go to the cash register and get it because those razors cost like $30 for a pack of 5. And what he did is he created a subscription model to get razors every week, so every month. So every month you get a set of razors to your door, and you don't have to deal with this whole bad experience, because it's kind of a crappy experience to have to go there and buy the things. So what happened basically, he founded in 2011. It was a startup. He was a startup and started basically with zero. He had funding in the end. He had he had quite a bit of funding, over 50 million in funding. But only 5 years later, he was able to sell this to Unilever for 1 billion. And that's pretty remarkable. That's a pretty remarkable. In 5 years' time, that's really quick. But I would argue that most companies like Unilever, they have actually a funding thing in there. They have a pretty big fund now to try to encourage startups, but I would argue that most companies would not be able to create something like this because they're just too scared to try something. There's too much risk involved. Second one is, you guys know Chewbacca Mom, and the idea of why I'm showing this is because sometimes if you believe in something so much, you just have to put yourself out there, and the internet's good for that. If you feel like a strong emotion, in this case, simple joy, then you just put yourself out there with no intention of making money. She just did it because she was sharing it with some friends.
Here, listen. Worth every penny!
So she did this in May 19th, 2016, and this was when Facebook Live first started out, so she was kind of early to the game. So what happened was she bought this mask. She was in the parking lot of Kohl's, which is like I don't know if you have Karstadt or a shopping center type, a shopping mall thing, and she did her live video and shared it with some friends. And as far as media goes, she didn't spend any money on it because it was free, right? But what happened was, at the end of the day, she had 150 million views, which I think most companies' brand stuff doesn't even get that much. And what happened was First, Kohl's department store visited her and gave her a bunch of gifts and gift certificates. Second, she has 2 kids. She got full scholarships to Southwest University. It's a university in Texas for her 2 kids. She got to meet J.J. Abrams, the director of Star Wars, 2 years ago. Hasbro made a Chewbacca mom figure, I think like a limited edition figure. And then obviously, since it's Facebook, she met Zuckerberg. She got to go out to California to meet Zuckerberg. And all because she just shared these things. She just tried them out. And that's what I'm saying. You just have to try these things out today. And you could add all these things up, and it was almost 500,000, which is pretty good. And the goal was not to make money. It was just to share her moment of joy with it. And I think that's something that is so spontaneous and so authentic. That's a word a lot of companies could also work on, is this authenticity. It just comes across as being authentic. The last one is even older than the other ones, and that's Grumpy Cat. So Grumpy Cat's real name is Tartar Sauce. So the owner lives in the south in the U.S., one of the southern states. And what happened is she had this strange cat, and she shared it with some friends, and it was fine. And then her brother took a video of it, and then shared it to a website called Reddit, which is a website for internet culture, basically. And then Grumpy Cat just kind of blew up, because Grumpy Cat it's such an unusual thing. And I think if you think about all the things that we see today, especially commercial stuff, a lot of times when you see an ad or something, you could just change the logo and it could be something else. But here in this case, Grumpy Cat is like so unique that it's really hard to mistake it for something else. So attention, yes. Earnings from 2012, so in the last 2 years from back then. If we compare that to Gwyneth Paltrow, she made about 30 million, which is pretty good. And then Grumpy Cat has been estimated to have made about 100 million. Same time frame. And what I find interesting here is Gwyneth Paltrow is all above the line, classic way of doing things. Grumpy Cat is everything else. Grumpy Cat for me is like the Hello Kitty of the internet age. And it's actually quite old now. But I think what's amazing is just the way it happened. So if you can imagine, the owner of Tartar Sauce, the lady, she used to be a waitress. Now she's not a waitress anymore. She's the manager of Grumpy Cat, because she has to manage Grumpy Cat's appearances, events, and license deals and stuff. So if you have an unusual animal at home, just put it out there. Also, the internet can be used, just like any tech. You can do great things with it and positive things, but you can also do bad things with it. And in this case, unfortunately, in the U.S., we see a lot of fake news. This was during the election and stuff. And a lot of people believe this stuff because it shows up on your Facebook feed, and they don't really understand, is this website, WTO5, 5 News, is it a fake website or not? And I think a lot of people just don't understand that that's not true. So I think there's always one side of the coin, but you also have to look at the other side of the coin. In this case, the stakes are higher. Grumpy Cat's funny, but here we have a president that just is really not that cool, to put it mildly. So by November 8th, it picked up almost 1 million engagements, which is a lot for this fake news. And that also has to do with emotion. That's why people share stuff, because it resonates with them. Oh yeah, I love Trump and I love the Pope, or whatever it might be. They know they support each other. So this is a quote from Zuckerberg, and I think it's really, really naive for these companies like Facebook, like Twitter, like Google, and like all these other companies to think that they have no part in the election, because they are a platform for distribution as well. And they have to understand how they actually influence people's lives today. But this is such a naive statement, it's crazy. But a few days later, he wrote a blog post on Facebook, said, yeah, actually, we're going to check into the fake news thing. But this idea of fake news isn't new. This is from War of the Worlds. And Orson Welles, I don't know if you guys remember this story. Basically, he had this fictional thing where War of the Worlds, aliens came down, and back then they only had radio, so they played it, and they didn't preface it with, okay, this is a piece of fiction, and people were freaking out. Okay, the world is ending. There's aliens coming down, but it's crazy because that happened back then. But now we have this fake news thing, and people are also freaking out. It's like we don't learn from our mistakes. So I'm going to wrap this up, and I'll read these to you because it's pretty hard to read. So the takeaway for experience is you have to create an intuitive, memorable, and human-centric holistic experience. It's not just about channels, and I think if we talk about media, everybody is interested in their own gain. So if you talk to a media company, they're going to probably be interested in making money, and the best way to make money is through a TV spot. If you talk to Facebook or Google, they want you to advertise on their platform because that's how they make money. Everybody has something in the game. But if you start backwards, start from the user perspective, what are they really interested in? And then figure out what channels make sense or what story. That's the better way to do things. Very hard to sell, but it's definitely has more traction. Imagine, this is something that I find fascinating now. So the big discussion now is AI, artificial intelligence, and most people's contact with AI is through Terminator and other fictional stories, Ex Machina, Her, whatever it might be, any books. But that is how we understand our world, through these stories. And that's how also engineers understand their world. But when you create a compelling story, then people will follow it. And in some cases, they'll build it. And I think it's more, even if you are not an engineer, if you're not a builder, then try to be a good storyteller, because somewhere will build your idea of the world. And the last thing is create, and it's pretty easy. I think you have to follow your curiosity and share it with the world. I think that's something, if you have kids or around kids, you understand that kids are, by nature, they're curious. And I think we as adults who are also curious, but our institutions have made it so it's hard to ask questions because everyone thinks you're dumb in the room then. But I think you just have to follow your curiosity and build things, because there's no reason not to today. So this is my very last slide, and this is something I show a lot, because I think in the time of answers, we live in this era of there's so many answers. I think questions become more important than answers. And you might not have the answer to the question right away, but I think if you live that direction, then life will move you into the answers. So this last video is a couple years ago. Because I live in Germany and we have a lot of vacation, we also have a summer house. Like, I don't know, in Sweden they have summer houses. So we have a cabin up north at the lake, and we go there every year and we go fishing and stuff. And this last video is a video of my dad and my cousin, my two kids. They're fishing, and they're just fishing here. And I was out of the boat at this point, and I was just taking a drone shot of them. And I think, like I said before, what's amazing here is just great tech changes your perspective on life. And I would have never been able to capture this moment before, unless I had a helicopter, of course. But now you can capture these moments all the time. The trick, though, is how do you stay in the moment without getting out of the moment? So sometimes the tech has to just be put away, but sometimes it's nice to create a memory. Thank you very much, and have a great day. I don't know, is there time for questions? Questions? Or you guys, there's something going on right now, right? Or something, some lottery or something? I don't know. Okay, I have one question for you guys. So I'm only here till my flight leaves tomorrow at 3, and I brought my drone, so I have to be around at 5. When I call that the golden hour. You can't say it now, but so you don't have to answer this now, but tell me, since we're in the city here, what is one thing I should not miss seeing? If I have to check out one thing in the city or in Montenegro in the area, what should I check out? Because I haven't checked any tourist books or anything. I haven't even Googled anything. So maybe some ideas afterwards we can talk about. And if you're interested, I have my drone. Like I said, we can go do a droney. If you have an epic place, we can capture it with. Yeah. Thanks again.